Vanessa Reynolds froze mid-sip, her coffee cup suspended inches from her lips. The bustling sounds of the roadside diner faded into background noise as her gaze locked onto the simple silver pendant hanging from her waitress's neck. It couldn't be, and yet, it was identical to the one she had placed around her newborn daughter's neck 30 years ago, right before she signed the adoption papers with trembling hands. "Ma'am? Would you like more coffee?" The waitress, her name tag read Lily, stood beside the table, coffee pot in hand, completely unaware that she had just turned Vanessa's world upside down. Vanessa's mind raced. The pendant was distinctive, a small, hand-carved silver teardrop with 3 tiny stars etched along one side. She had saved for months to buy it, working double shifts at the convenience store while hiding her pregnancy from everyone. It was the only gift she could afford to give her baby, a token to let her daughter know she had been deeply loved, even as Vanessa made the heartbreaking choice to give her a chance at a better life. "That pendant," Vanessa said, her voice barely audible. "It's beautiful. May I ask where you got it?" Lily's hand instinctively reached up to touch the silver teardrop. "This old thing? I've had it my whole life. It's the only thing I have from my birth mother," she said with a casual shrug that belied the weight of her words. "Never knew her, but she left this for me. Kind of silly how I've held on to it, I guess." A dizzying wave of possibility washed over Vanessa. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. Could it really be her daughter standing before her? This tired-looking waitress with the kind eyes and the familiar crease between her brows when she smiled, the same crease Vanessa saw every morning in her own mirror? "Are you okay, ma'am? You've gone pale." Lily set down the coffee pot, genuine concern in her voice. Vanessa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She'd spent millions on private investigators over the years, searching for the baby girl she'd given up. The closed adoption records had been impenetrable, and every lead had turned cold. She'd nearly given up hope. And now, by some twist of fate, had her daughter literally served her coffee in a nondescript diner she'd only stopped at because her driver needed a break? "I'm fine," Vanessa finally managed. "Just remembered something important." She glanced around the diner, taking in the worn booths and outdated decor. Such a far cry from the luxury she had surrounded herself with, the luxury she had worked so hard to achieve so that she could one day provide for the daughter she had lost. Lily smiled and moved on to the next table, unaware that the elegantly dressed woman watching her was the billionaire tech CEO whose face occasionally graced magazine covers. Unaware that this chance encounter might change both their lives forever. Vanessa's hand shook as she reached for her phone. She needed to be certain before she said anything. One look at a pendant wasn't proof enough, no matter how unique it seemed. She'd been disappointed too many times before. But as she watched Lily move efficiently between tables, noting the young woman's determined stride and the proud set of her shoulders despite her obvious exhaustion, Vanessa felt a connection she couldn't explain. She left a tip larger than her meal bill and scribbled her private number on the receipt with a simple note, "If you ever need anything." It wasn't much, but it was a start, a thin thread that might lead her back to the daughter she had never stopped loving. As Vanessa stepped out into the bright afternoon sunlight, she made a decision. She would come back tomorrow. And the day after. She would find a way to know for certain if Lily was the baby she had held just once, 30 years ago, before forcing herself to let go. Jack Reynolds, Vanessa's longtime driver and confidant, noticed something different about his employer during the ride back to her estate. Her usual focus on conference calls and emails was absent, replaced by a distant stare out the window. "Everything all right, Ms. Reynolds?" he asked, meeting her eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. "I'm not sure, Jack," she replied softly. "I think I may have just found Dorothy." Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He'd been with Vanessa for 20 years, long enough to know about the daughter she'd given up and her relentless search. "Are you certain?" he asked carefully. "No," Vanessa admitted. "But there's a possibility I never thought I'd have." Back in her sprawling home office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific, Vanessa sank into her leather chair and closed her eyes. The memories she typically kept locked away came flooding back. 30 years ago, she had been just 17, a bright girl from a struggling neighborhood with dreams bigger than her circumstances. When she discovered she was pregnant after a brief relationship with her high school boyfriend, her parents had made their position clear: keep the baby and lose their support, or give it up and they would help her through college. "You have potential, Vanessa," her mother had said. "Don't throw it away like I did." The decision had torn her apart, but with no resources and a determination to build a better life that might one day benefit her child, she had signed the adoption papers. The only comfort was the assurance that her baby would go to a loving, financially stable home. Vanessa had channeled her grief into relentless work. A scholarship to Stanford. A computer science degree. A tiny startup in her garage that eventually became Reynolds Tech, now one of the largest tech companies in the world. She had been driven not just by ambition but by a promise to herself, that one day she would find her daughter and give her everything she hadn't been able to before. The search had begun 15 years ago, once Vanessa had made her first million. Private investigators, adoption agencies, DNA databases, she had tried everything. The trail had always gone cold at the same point: her daughter's adoption records had been sealed, and then further complicated when the original agency closed down after a fire destroyed many of their paper files. Vanessa opened her desk drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was an exact replica of the pendant she had given her baby, the match to what she had seen around Lily's neck today. She had commissioned it years ago, wanting to keep a physical connection to her child. For the next 2 days, Vanessa returned to the diner at different times, sitting in Lily's section, watching and listening. Each interaction strengthened her suspicion. Lily's laugh had the same unexpected lift at the end as her own. Her hands gestured the same way when she spoke. And there was something in her eyes, a thoughtful intelligence that seemed familiar. On the third day, Vanessa arrived just before closing time. The diner was nearly empty. "You're becoming a regular," Lily commented as she brought Vanessa's usual coffee. "Most folks with your kind of watch don't stop in places like this more than once." Vanessa smiled. "Maybe I appreciate the coffee and the company more than you think." Lily paused, studying Vanessa. "Why do I feel like you're here for more than our mediocre pie?" The directness caught Vanessa off guard. It was the same bluntness she was known for in boardroom meetings. "I'm interested in people's stories," Vanessa said carefully. "And I sense you have an interesting one." Lily laughed. "Not much to tell. Foster kid who aged out of the system. Working 2 jobs to pay for night classes in nursing. Hoping to get into a proper program next year." She gestured around the diner. "Not exactly a bestseller." Vanessa's heart sank at the words foster kid. The adoption hadn't gone as promised. "Your pendant," Vanessa said, taking a chance. "You mentioned it was from your birth mother?" Lily's hand went to it instinctively. "Yeah. Only thing I've got from her. My first foster mom told me it came with me when I was a baby." Her face took on a distant expression. "Used to make up stories about her when I was little. That she was a princess, or a spy, or someone important who had to give me up for some noble reason." Vanessa swallowed hard against the tightness in her throat. "And now? What do you think now?" Lily shrugged, her expression hardening slightly. "Now I figure she was probably just another teenager who got in trouble and couldn't deal. Can't really blame her, but no point romanticizing it either." The word stung, but Vanessa recognized the defense mechanism. She had built similar walls herself. "Sometimes," Vanessa said quietly, "people make impossible choices for what they believe are the right reasons. It doesn't mean they ever stop thinking about what they lost." Something in her tone made Lily look at her more carefully. For a moment, there seemed to be a flash of recognition, a flicker of connection. Then Lily glanced at the clock. "Sorry, but we're closing soon. Anything else I can get you?" Vanessa shook her head. "No, thank you." She left another generous tip and her card underneath, not her business card with the Reynolds Tech logo that might be recognized, but a plain one with just her name and personal number. If you ever want to talk more, she said simply, sliding it across the table. 3 weeks had passed since Vanessa's discovery at the diner. She had returned several times, carefully building a casual rapport with Lily without revealing her suspicions. Each visit confirmed what her heart already knew: this young woman was almost certainly her daughter. The resemblance had become undeniable: the determined set of Lily's jaw, the thoughtful pause before she spoke, even the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when concentrating. Meanwhile, Vanessa had quietly set her most trusted investigator to work. Bernard had been her security chief for 15 years, and if anyone could discreetly confirm Lily's identity, it was him. "I've got the records you requested, Ms. Reynolds," Bernard said, placing a thin folder on her desk one Tuesday morning. "It wasn't easy, but we found the connection." Vanessa's hand trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Inside was a partial history of Lily's journey through the system. Born Eliza Jane Doe at St. Mary's Hospital on April 17, her daughter's birthday. Given up for adoption and initially placed with the Thompsons, a couple from San Diego. But then, tragedy had intervened. The adoptive parents died in a car accident when she was just 14 months old, Bernard explained gently. With no other family willing to take her, she entered the foster system. The original adoption agency was supposed to attempt to place her again, but by then they were under investigation for financial irregularities. Many children's cases, including hers, fell through the cracks. Vanessa closed her eyes, absorbing the painful reality that her daughter had never received the stable home she'd been promised. All those years of imagining her child growing up with loving parents, receiving the opportunities Vanessa couldn't provide, it had been a comforting fiction. "Her pendant," Vanessa said hoarsely. "The report confirms it?" Bernard nodded. "It's mentioned in her initial placement documents. Silver teardrop pendant with 3 stars, to remain with the child at birth, mother's request." That afternoon, Vanessa found herself back at the diner. It was busier than usual, and Lily moved quickly between tables, a sheen of exhaustion evident beneath her professional smile. When she reached Vanessa's table, she paused. "You know, I've seen you almost every day. For 3 weeks, and I still don't know your name." "Vanessa," she replied with a genuine smile. "And I've noticed you look particularly tired today, Lily." Lily sighed, dropping her professional demeanor for a moment. "Double shift. My second job called in a staffing emergency at the elder care facility where I work nights. I'll be fine." "You work 2 jobs and take classes?" Vanessa asked, impressed despite already knowing the answer from Bernard's investigation. "Have to. Nursing school isn't cheap, and neither is rent." Lily gave a tired smile. "But I'm not complaining. I've seen harder times." As Lily moved to another table, Vanessa overheard a conversation at the counter between the diner's manager and a maintenance worker. The ancient air conditioning system had failed again, and the estimate for repairs was more than the owner wanted to pay. "3rd time this summer," the manager complained. "And now Helen's threatening to close the place if business doesn't pick up. Doesn't help that the construction next door is driving customers away." Vanessa noted the worry that crossed Lily's face as she overheard the conversation. Another potential setback for her daughter who had already faced too many. After finishing her meal, Vanessa approached the counter and quietly paid for the repair of the air conditioning system, making the manager promise not to mention who had provided the funds. That evening, as Vanessa worked late in her home office, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" she answered cautiously. "Is this Vanessa? From the diner?" Lily's voice came through, sounding hesitant. "Yes, it is." Vanessa's heart raced. "Is everything all right? I hope it's not weird that I called. You left your card a while back, and..." Lily paused. "Frank, the manager, just told me that some anonymous person paid for the new AC system. I don't know why, but I had a feeling it might be you." Vanessa considered denying it but decided against another lie. "I overheard the conversation. It seemed like the diner means a lot to the people who work there." "It does," Lily confirmed. But that's a lot of money to spend on a place you just visit occasionally. I've been fortunate in my life, Vanessa said carefully. And I believe in supporting places and people that matter. There was a long pause before Lily spoke again. Look, I'm not usually this forward, but there's something about you. I feel like we've met before. Or like I should know you from somewhere. Vanessa's breath caught. I've had the same feeling. Would you? Lily hesitated. Would you want to grab coffee sometime? Not at the diner. Somewhere else. Just to talk? I'd like that very much, Vanessa replied, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. They agreed to meet at a small coffee shop near the community college where Lily took her night classes. As Vanessa hung up, she realized she was at a crossroads. She could continue building this tentative friendship without revealing her identity, or she could take the risk of telling Lily the truth, a truth that might either heal old wounds or create new ones. That night, Vanessa pulled out the small wooden box where she kept her most precious mementos. Among them was a tiny hospital bracelet, a faded Polaroid of a newborn with a shock of dark hair, and a letter she had written but never been able to send. To my daughter, it began, there hasn't been a day I haven't thought of you. Vanessa carefully refolded the yellowed paper. After 30 years of searching, she had found her daughter. Now came the harder part, finding the courage to reveal who she really was. The coffee shop was quiet when Vanessa arrived, early as usual. She chose a corner table that offered some privacy while still allowing her to watch the door. Her normally steady hands fidgeted with the cardboard sleeve on her cup as she waited. When Lily walked in, Vanessa was struck again by how much of herself she saw in the young woman. Today, free from her waitress uniform, Lily wore simple jeans and a faded blue sweater that somehow made her look both younger and more vulnerable. I was half convinced you wouldn't show, Lily said as she sat down across from Vanessa, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. People like you don't usually hang around people like me. People like me? Vanessa echoed, curious about how Lily perceived her. You know, Lily gestured vaguely at Vanessa's tailored slacks and cashmere sweater. Successful. Put together. You've obviously got money, even if you try to downplay it. Vanessa smiled. I wasn't always put together. But you're right, I've been fortunate. Though I'm curious why you wanted to meet if you're so skeptical about my intentions. Lily's fingers went automatically to her pendant, a gesture Vanessa had noticed she made when uncomfortable. Honestly? I'm not sure. There's just something familiar about you that I can't shake. She leaned forward slightly. Plus, and, she works the night shift with me at Golden Pines Retirement Home, she swears she recognized you from a magazine. Says you run some big tech company. Vanessa felt a jolt of alarm. She'd been careful to keep a low profile, but her recent inclusion in Forbes' most influential women list had increased her public visibility. I do work in tech, she acknowledged carefully. Reynolds Tech. Lily's eyes widened. Wait, you're that Vanessa Reynolds? The one who started the company that makes those medical tablets all the hospitals use now? Why the heck are you eating at Joe's Diner 3 times a week? The question hung between them. Vanessa could feel the moment teetering on a precipice. She took a deep breath. Initially, it was chance. My driver needed a break during a long drive back from a meeting in Santa Barbara. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. But I kept coming back because of you, Lily. Wariness flashed across Lily's face. Me? Why? Your pendant, Vanessa said quietly. I recognized it the first day I saw you. Lily's hand went to the silver teardrop protectively. What do you mean, you recognized it? It's one of a kind. My birth mother left it with me. Not entirely one of a kind, Vanessa said. She reached into her purse and withdrew a small velvet box. Her hand was steady now as she opened it and placed it on the table between them. Lily stared at the identical silver teardrop pendant nestled in the velvet. Her face went pale. I don't understand, she whispered. 30 years ago, Vanessa began, her voice soft but clear, I was 17 years old, pregnant, and terrified. My parents gave me an ultimatum: give up the baby and they would help me through college, or keep it and be on my own with no support, no education, and no future for either of us. Lily's eyes, so like Vanessa's own, grew wide with shock. Are you saying? I made what I thought was the best choice for both of us, Vanessa continued. I was promised you would go to a good family. I bought that pendant, she nodded toward Lily's neck, and asked that it stay with you, so you would always have something from me. Lily sat frozen, her face a storm of emotions. This isn't possible. You're saying you're my birth mother? That's crazy. Why would a billionaire CEO be looking for the daughter she threw away? This doesn't make sense. I never threw you away, Vanessa said, the words catching in her throat. And I wasn't always wealthy. When I gave you up, I was just a scared teenager working at a convenience store to save for the community college application fee. How did you find me? Lily asked, her voice hardening. Have you been stalking me? Vanessa winced at the accusation. The pendant was pure chance, I recognized it that first day. After that, I did have someone look into your background to confirm my suspicions. I know it sounds intrusive, but I've been searching for you for 15 years, Lily. Every legal avenue possible. Lily stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is too much. I don't know what you want from me, but I can't do this right now. I don't want anything from you, Vanessa said quickly. I just wanted you to know the truth. To know that you were never abandoned because you weren't wanted. That I have thought about you every single day. Lily shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. I need to go. Please, Vanessa said, reaching into her purse again. Take this. She held out a sealed envelope. It's a letter I wrote to you years ago. Read it when you're ready. My number's in there too. Lily hesitated, then took the envelope and walked quickly out of the cafe without looking back. Vanessa remained at the table, her untouched coffee growing cold. She had known this moment could go poorly, had prepared herself for rejection, but the reality was still devastating. Back in her car, Jack waited silently, knowing from Vanessa's expression that things hadn't gone well. Give her time, he said gently as they pulled away from the curb. It's a lot to process. Vanessa nodded, watching the city pass by through the window. She had spent decades building a technology empire, overcoming seemingly insurmountable obstacles, but this, bridging the gap between herself and her daughter, might be the most challenging task she had ever faced. That night, alone in her home office, Vanessa stared at her phone, willing it to ring, knowing it wouldn't. On her desk lay a folder Bernard had compiled, Lily's medical records showing a history of childhood asthma, her stellar academic records despite constantly changing schools, the police report from when she was 16 and briefly homeless after aging out of a particularly bad foster placement. Vanessa closed the folder, a renewed sense of determination settling over her. She had found her daughter against impossible odds. Now she would need to find the patience to give Lily the space and time to decide if she wanted to be found. 2 weeks passed without a word from Lily. Vanessa continued her routine, running her company with the same precision and focus she was known for, but inside, a deep anxiety had taken root. She had stopped visiting the diner, not wanting to pressure Lily, though she desperately wanted to see her again. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Vanessa was reviewing quarterly reports in her office when her assistant buzzed through the intercom. Ms. Reynolds, there's a young woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent. Her name is Lily Carson. Vanessa's heart leaped into her throat. Send her in right away, please. Moments later, Lily stood in the doorway of Vanessa's spacious corner office, looking small against the backdrop of floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furnishings. She was soaking wet from the rain, still wearing her diner uniform. I read your letter, she said without preamble. I've read it about 50 times, actually. Vanessa nodded, uncertain what to say. The letter had been brutally honest, detailing her fear and heartbreak at 17, her desperate search over the years, and her endless regret at what her daughter had endured in foster care. Lily took a few tentative steps into the office. I also did some research on you. It's not hard to find information about Vanessa Reynolds, tech pioneer and philanthropist. A hint of a smile crossed her face. There was an article about how you specifically developed medical record tablets for underfunded hospitals because you believe healthcare access should be a right, not a privilege. I meant that, Vanessa said softly. I know, Lily replied. Just like I know about the scholarship foundation you started for foster kids aging out of the system. The one that pays for housing and education. The one that somehow reached out to me last week with an offer of a full ride to nursing school. Vanessa winced. I should have been more subtle. You think? Lily let out a short laugh that held more nervousness than humor. Look, I'm not here to yell at you, even though I probably should be. I'm not even here to tell you I'm ready to have some magical mother-daughter relationship. Then why are you here? Vanessa asked gently. Lily's hand went to her pendant, the familiar gesture tugging at Vanessa's heart. Because after I got over the shock and the anger, I realized something important. My whole life, I've wondered where I came from. Who I got my stubbornness from. Why I'm good at math but terrible at remembering names. Whether anybody ever really wanted me. She took a deep breath. And now there's someone standing right in front of me who can answer those questions. Who says she spent 15 years looking for me? Who kept the matching pendant to the only thing I've ever had from my past? I have more than just the pendant, Vanessa said, her voice soft. If you want to see. I kept everything. Lily nodded hesitantly. I think I'd like that. Vanessa moved to a cabinet behind her desk and unlocked it, removing the wooden box she had shown Bernard weeks earlier. She placed it on the coffee table in the sitting area of her office and gestured for Lily to join her on the sofa. With trembling fingers, Lily opened the box. Inside were the treasures Vanessa had guarded for 30 years, the hospital bracelet with baby girl doe printed on it, the Polaroid of newborn Lily, a lock of dark infant hair, and every scrap of information Vanessa had managed to gather about her daughter's whereabouts over the years. You really never forgot about me, Lily whispered, tears welling in her eyes as she held the tiny bracelet. Not for a single day, Vanessa confirmed, fighting back her own tears. Lily looked up, studying Vanessa's face with new awareness. I have your eyes. And your hands. My foster mom used to say I had pianist's fingers, but I never knew where they came from. My mother played piano, Vanessa said. I never had the patience to learn properly. I'm stubborn that way too, Lily admitted with a small smile. Once I start something, I can't let it go until it's finished. It drove my teachers crazy. I get that from my father, Vanessa said. Along with a terrible sense of direction. I still get lost in buildings I've been in a dozen times. Lily laughed genuinely then. Me too. I've worked at the retirement home for 3 years and still take wrong turns. For the next hour, they talked, tentatively at first, then with growing ease. Lily shared stories from her childhood, some painful, some surprisingly joyful. Vanessa spoke of her own youth, her parents now both gone, and her journey to build her company. As evening approached, Lily glanced at her watch. I should go. I have class in an hour. Vanessa nodded, not wanting to push. May I call you sometime? Maybe we could have dinner? Lily hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. But. Vanessa prompted gently. I won't take your scholarship, Lily said firmly. Not because I don't appreciate it, but because I need to do this my way. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. Vanessa recognized her own determination in her daughter's stance. I understand. But will you at least let me help you find a better apartment? Somewhere closer to your school? No strings attached. Lily considered this. I'll think about it. She smiled slightly. Maybe we can talk about it over dinner. As Lily gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. There's one thing I've always wondered that wasn't in your letter. My name. Did you name me before you gave me up? Vanessa nodded, emotion threatening to overwhelm her again. Elizabeth Jane. After my grandmother. She was the strongest woman I've ever known. Elizabeth, Lily tested the name. I like that better than the horrible Jane Doe they stuck me with in the system. She touched her pendant once more. Thank you for this. For keeping a part of you with me all these years. After Lily left, Vanessa stood at her office window watching the rain, feeling a strange mixture of hope and caution. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were 30 years of absence to overcome, wounds that had scarred over but never fully healed for either of them. But for the first time in decades, Vanessa felt complete. The piece of her heart that had been missing for so long had finally begun to find its way home. And even if their relationship would never be what it might have been had circumstances been different, it was a second chance neither of them had dared to hope for. As she gathered her things to leave, Vanessa's phone chimed with a text message. Still on for dinner next week? There's this little Italian place near my new school I've been wanting to try. Lily, Elizabeth? Vanessa smiled and typed back, I'll be there. And you can be whoever you want to be. Because that was the greatest gift she could now offer her daughter, not money or connections or opportunities, but the simple freedom to choose her own path forward, knowing that this time, she wouldn't be walking it alone.